down. We're going to start our next session. So just to introduce Alberto. So Alberto will tell you more about his background, but I met him first through an organisation called Make Sense.
Called what, sorry?
Make Sense.
Makes sense.
And actually part of my experience with that was so it's essentially a volunteer network that helps social entrepreneurs brainstorming ideas to try and help them grow. And I met a lot of people involved, but I was also very lucky enough to get some experience of having a set of volunteers brainstorm and help me with some ideas. So part of the reason that we thought it would be great to have somebody from Make Sense come and explain more about the movement is that they're very successful in scaling a global volunteer network. So it's really from that perspective of what can we learn from standing on the shoulders of giants that have done these things before. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alberto.
Thanks a lot. Hi everyone.
Hi.
Very good. A bit of a headache. Hope you had a good day so far. And thank you very much, Sam, for having me, and Anton and Julian for having me, and Anton for hosting us. I think, as Sam was saying, today I would like to keep it very informal, but also going through some of the sort of the success factor of this community that is called Make Sense, that I've been part of for now it's like almost 9 years. I was one of the first volunteer in London. The movement initially started in Paris. I think even though I have to say that right now I'm not as involved as before, the reason why I'm always very happy to talk about Make Sense in occasion like that, and sort of to continue to help other people to understand how to build successful communities to sort of solve social problem, is because during my experience of Make Sense, I have to say that probably by chance, I don't know, it's very also, I think that aspect was very interesting, but by chance, we grow this community from just a little group of people in Paris into a community in 35 countries by doing a lot of things right. Obviously, we had sort of some problems, a lot of failures as well. But I think we did a lot of things right, and I think now, by looking back of what we did, when I sort of reflect back on what I did, and then I compare this to what I kept reading in sort of the literature about how to build movement, how to build communities, all these articles that we see across different publications, they're more or less business oriented. I have to say that a lot of things are actually in those articles. So, and to be honest, when everything started, I have to say that I'm 100% I'm sure that the people that started that and how we built this, it wasn't at all scientific. Okay, we didn't read any book, we didn't read anything. It's like, this is the frame, or this is the blueprint. This is how we should do things. This is how other community did wrong. This is what we should do right. And then we executed according to that. We didn't. Okay. So probably now, I don't know. Again, I'm not as involved as before, but I think probably in the third phase of Make Sense, or let's say the last 2 years and a half, also I think the core team started to look also other movements, and probably start to also be scientific in that sense by looking at other other communities, how to build things compared to them. But for me, the very interesting thing is that everything we did was very random, and not random in a sense, what we did was not driven by any playbook. It was all driven by experimentation and to be honest, common sense, and a complete awareness and empathy of the people that were part of the community itself. So today I really want to I want to try to look into this journey by also referring to some things that I've been reading along, because I think in a way frameworks and blueprint can help to better understand concept, to better remember concept that they can be applied. As I said, like I would like to, to talk about how to build a community, which is a community is definitely not what some people talk like community. When people say online, we build a community, have this community, have this Instagram community. Like, I think there is also probably a good conversation that we can have here later. Like, what is a community? What is a movement? And then why we should build community, or versus why we shouldn't. Instead, like I think the story of Makes Sense is more close to a movement, but it's probably a movement that can be very similar to, what one of the most famous movements is Occupy Wall Street, with a very, very, very strong movement with a very strong social cause, but probably more successful for several reasons than Occupy Wall Street. So the interesting also story of Makes Sense that we'll see later, that indeed we've been able to create this community of movement that is in a sweet spot of being actually then becoming a business and continue to be such a movement where everybody can jump in, jump out. Before to go into this, like let me go through in a few words of what actually Makes Sense is. Makes Sense started and continue to exist as a global movement of, now we call it citizen, that is helping such entrepreneurs across the world to solve challenges that they have in their business in order then to help them to grow and scale their activities. Everything that is done within Makes Sense, within this community, is completely free, is completely open, and it doesn't have any sort of tangible rules, and then it's completely built around collaboration and open and the idea of open source. So basically, it's literally a group of people that in a very practical way, what they do is they apply what is practice of design thinking. They capture challenges of such entrepreneur in different cities, and they run workshops. They can help this such entrepreneur to go from the problem into a prototype solution. Everything that is done is completely free, and it's completely done in a very sort of open source environment where anyone can jump in, jump out, helping a social entrepreneur. Then the social entrepreneur gets is sort of the result of this session, and go away. Then this is what is happening in 35 countries around the world, several cities with thousand people involved. Basically, on the in the way that these things has been built has been done like completely without any capital, any sort of financial support from anyone, like no raising funds, no donation. Everything has been free, and that's why I think that's what makes when we talk about the story, when makes everything quite remarkable and a bit weird, because they say like how the hell you did. So I think that there is a second side of the story that maybe we can talk more in details later. Is that Makes Sense from being this sort of a free global movement also become a business, where basically by applying all this knowledge about how to build communities around social causes, they start to apply in collaboration with stakeholders that eventually will pay to gain more insight from this knowledge created by the community. So makes sense, even though like sort of didn't touch at all in the way that the community grew and sort of maintained itself, then created business on the top of the community in order to start to generate revenues, but with complete separate business and revenues that were generated eventually would be redistributed within the community to then also start to invest a little bit on the community itself. But that's where, like, I think the interesting sort of conversation comes in when it's about Make Sense, because Make Sense is one side is a community, is a movement, and the other side is actually business. But legally, there are actually two completely different entities that grow and sort of act in different way. Before, maybe we can you're probably gonna have more questions about Make Sense, but I think I want to go through the story of the fact that I believe that the interesting thing of Make Sense is that Make Sense has been able to shift completely from to be one of the strong case study of showed how as a business you can shift from having a complete vertical mindset into horizontal mindset. And then when I talk about this, I sort of identify 5 different aspects. So moving from a vertical mindset to horizontal mindset means, you're moving from having a formal governance basically built around institutions into an informal governance that more built around participation. So rather than having top-down governance rules, you decide what the rules are within the community. The second is like, in terms of value, you build the community instead of around competition, you build around collaboration and open source. Then instead of like as a business and as a community, as a movement, there's absolutely no confidentiality in the sense that everything has to be transparent. Is transparent, and that was within Make Sense. And then rather than really focus on expertise and really putting the sort of focus on what the people should have, so defining, okay, if you have these skills, you need to do that. Actually incentivize people on the fact that everybody can do everything and everybody can help social entrepreneur. Like you can have one skill on another, but what is important that by putting these skills together is where you actually create an impact. And then the last aspect is rather than focusing around having membership or long-term affiliation, looking into having sort of a platform movement where anyone can jump in and jump out according to their needs and of course also the time they can sort of offer to the movement itself. So I think that in a sense like that keep sort of more sustainable the movement, because what matters then you want to have a critical mass that is X amount of people. Doesn't matter who is there. It's important that sort of the movement is still the same amount, the same number. So someone will drop out, but if you keep the door open, someone will drop in. So then the number is still the same. And I think this is basically sort of 5 distinctive aspects where prove and show that how you switch from the vertical to the horizontal mindset. I left there. This was supposed to be horizontal mindset. I think then if we go more in the specific of how the movement, why the movement was successful, and I think here we can start to compare to other movements. For example, what was in a specific Occupy Wall Street, which is a very famous and important movement that was recognized across the world, but also the
Just wondering, what about moving it down to the next step? Would that help?
yeah.
Or some people if you guys want to sit on the floor maybe?
So I think discussing to more in a specific of what were actually the success factor of the community, which is made the community distinctive over or the movement distinctive over other movements. I sort of regroup this point in this list. I think this is also an interesting conversation that we had with Sam. That's probably also when everything started of having been on in this talk, when we talk about why Make Sense was successful as a movement. And I think there are many factors, but probably if we have to summarize, we can summarize it here. The first is that the mission of Make Sense, it was very clear, very tangible, and simple. There isn't many sort of big statement that are sometimes that can be complicated to understand or sort of complicated to perceive as reachable. Okay, the mission, it was like, okay, we help such entrepreneurs to solve challenges. Then, to what extent you will help, how much you will help, and then would you actually solve all the challenge? That is another story. I think the reason why it was is very successful is that because the message is simple and it's very practical in a way everybody can achieve that mission. Then we can argue about indeed how, to what extent the challenge is solved, but I think that's another side of the picture that is obviously open to conversation. The second point is about the leadership of the movement itself, and I think here maybe I will be a bit sort of controversial in terms of the fact that we talk a lot about having a horizontal mindset versus vertical mindset, and I think it makes sense as a very strong horizontal mindset for the reason by following the aspect that we talked before. But at the end of the day, the leadership of the movement is spread around, but there are still divided in group where there is still a group of people that is considered within the movement the leader of the movement. Then this leader eventually, or this group of leader eventually will change, but the leader still exists. And I think that's a very it's very interesting because I heard a lot about horizontal leadership, or like everybody can have their say, everybody is a leader. I think there is this narrative a lot in business and then sort of, and then it's very interesting how we can read this statement. Because yes, having an horizontal mindset, it means that everybody can have a word, all the words are considered, but then I think it's very naive to think that a movement can go forward without a leader, or by really consider that everybody is a leader. And I think if you look on Occupy Wall Street, and then is one of the reasons why it didn't work, is that first of all, we can also look at the mission. It was very complicated and very hard to think that could be achievable. And the second, there was no leadership by based on the vision of the movement itself. Like they want to build a system with no leadership. And I think that is I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. But I believe that it doesn't work. I believe that you still need some leader, and then how this leader acts and the values of the leadership. I think that's another story. But you still need to have some leader. Then the third aspect is the message. Again, I think it makes sense. What the successful of it is that the message was very simple. We were talking about helping such entrepreneur, and then basically having fun by doing that, and then learn new things by solving this problem. And I think in terms of the message, especially because the audience is very young, it's simple to understand, and like it's simple to appreciate. It's very hard to have anyone to sort of argue against that the message is, is wrong, is no, and it's not positive, or it's not, it's as nice things to hear. So obviously is something that everybody in here would be attracted to be part of. The fourth aspect is the agenda. Again, I think the agenda of Make Sense has been always, since day zero, to create a community that will spread around the world. So, and then to do it with less money as possible, and in a more scalable way as possible. And I think because the idea was that, okay, there are such entrepreneurs everywhere in the world, and then we, as a community, we believe that such entrepreneur is one of the solutions to make the world better. So by helping them, you help the world as a consequence. So the agenda from who started this was very clear, and then it was quite obsessive. But it was it always the people that started this, and also myself, that I got involved after 8 months that everything started. It was the direction. It was very clear. So since day one, it's like we need to move from here to this. We need to engage this amount of people. So if today we have X, tomorrow we need to Z. And then it was never sort of a conversation around, we need to build this brand, we need to build this sort of technology, and then it was all about, okay, we need to help such entrepreneur, we need to bring as many people as possible to do what we do. Then the other aspect is, which I think probably was one of the most successful in my opinion, but one of the most critical for the success, is that this and the one after is the inbound process of new members. This is something that sometimes a lot of community are getting wrong. It's like how you can when you build a community, you need to be prepared of basically getting requests of people they want to join every day potentially, and then they have questions and you need to give them answers. Because when people have questions and you don't give them answers, you reduce drastically their engagement, because when people are confused, when people don't understand what's going on. So again, I think this is connected to the message, the agenda, and the leadership. When they don't understand to who to speak, understand why they're there and what they have to do and how they can do what you suggest to do, then it's not going to work, or a large percentage of people that potentially can be part of your movement will drop off. So then you're wasting a lot of energy to bring people that would never then. You do a good job on the first acquisition part, so where you create interest on be part of something, but then when they're in, you waste their energy and your energy to actually get them involved. Sometimes it's very. I see there are a lot of people, they think that via some social media, some messages, some meetup is, that's how you create a community. And I think that's, again, we're going back on the first slide, it's like, I don't think that is creating a community, that is like gathering some people around together, which is valuable, but creating a community movement is something completely different. They require like 100 times the effort than create a meetup. Okay. And I think, again, also within the inbound process, there is definitely is very important to think about the reward and the reputation system within the community itself, the movement. And again, like this here, like maybe we're being maybe controversial. I was hearing a lot about before to talk about capitalism, and which is very interesting. And then I believe, obviously capitalism is definitely not the right system, but is the system that that the majority of people are sort of grew up with. So I think is a system that is based on reward and reputation, and I think so that's an aspect that basically are two aspects that are very important to think about when you want to build a movement where people are engaged. So the people need to understand what they're gonna get from their investment, their time, and how their effort will be recognized. And I think this is because capitalism also created like a system beside like all sort of the economic aspect and all the complexity conversation that we can have. I think the capitalism created like a system where people have strong egos. It's a fact. So I think beside all this macroeconomic lesson that we can have, we are in a system where people have egos. So they need to understand what they're gonna get from their time, how they're gonna build a reputation by doing certain things. Then, to build a successful community and movement, you don't need to feed this sort of this pattern, but you need to take it in consideration. Like it would be naive to think about that people don't have an ego, don't need to be rewarded, don't need to have a reputation. Like, it would be like you can really exclude this from the picture, but then you need to play with the consequences if your goal is to build a community. And then the last aspect, I think. Again, I think really the last, which is around the business model, is more about, is really depend how we want to, it really depend on the context of the conversation in terms of building a community. So we can read this in different ways. So if it's about building a movement or a community for the sake of it, taking consideration the other, you definitely don't need a business. I don't want to say that any community needs a business model. It's more about if you're building a business, I think that's we're going into a bit later. If you're building a business and you think about, okay, I'm going to build this business on the top of a community, then you need to understand how to build a community, but also how to build a business model. Like your community can't be the business model. Like sometimes people say, okay, I'm building this community and then I'm gonna make money out of it. And I don't think it works. Like I think as soon as like you introduce business model practice within building a community, it doesn't become a community or movement anymore. It becomes a business. So then then it become, okay, how can you build a business? Like, in order to make your community to feed your business, is basically is a two-side story. Like it's like, for example, makes sense, build this movement, and it kept going, and it's untouched, and then it built business on the top of it. And I think what they did is basically transfer the knowledge and the practice they learned by doing the first side of the picture into the second side of the picture. But the two worlds are separate. So also in the conversation, when also the business on the top of Make Sense have different names, have different legal entities, have clear team, so when they talk about the business, they refer to the business. When they talk about the movement, they refer to the movement. So I think this is a very interesting line to discuss, and it really depends on what someone wants to do. To conclude, before we go probably into more chat, I think 4 aspects. And then again, I think this is more triggered by these last 3 slides. Is more triggered by the narrative that I kept hearing. Is that, like, if you want to build a business, you need to build a community. If you want to succeed, you need to build a community. If it's about business, and if it's like, you need to really think about, okay, do you really want to build a community? But do you really need it? Like, is the community really part of your strategy? And I have to say that, like, I've been talking with a lot of people in this year. Like, at the end of the day, when people really think through, out of 9 out of 10, then they say, well, probably actually it's not. I don't really need the community. I don't really need to build a community. And I think this is because sometimes we make a confusion of, like, building, again, here, if we want to move to having more responsible businesses, like, to be a responsible business doesn't mean you need to build a community.
You talk about building consensus.
Sorry?
You talk about building consensus.
In what sense?
In the sense to building awareness across the community in order for you to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
Or put in place a tactic that will allow you to do whatever.
Yeah, no, but I think I'm going to reply to this in the sense that, like, I think there is a strong difference between building a community, building a movement, and building a business that is user, people, and consumer oriented. Like, if you want to create something that solve a problem and really understand the people and really sort of include the people in your decision making, or you really want to build something by understanding really what the people want, you don't need to build a community. Like, you build something, you need to build a relevant business for the people. But I think this is another complete different conversation, which is like as like the other best practice. But because when you build a community, you need legitimacy. So you like, if you build a community before to build a business, like, you need to ask yourself, I'm actually the right person to do this? Like, are people gonna listen to me? Like, a lot of people, and I think there is around the social media sort of era where we are, I believe a lot of people are building narratives without any legitimacy. So when it's about growing an Instagram account, which is not building a community or building a movement, it's growing an Instagram account, which is, by the way, like, I'm not saying, like, there isn't any sort of sense of critic in me when I'm not against that. It's more like in this I think in this year where we are now, I think again probably is a failure of the capitalism. Sometimes we talk about things with the wrong names, with the wrong words. So and I'm very obsessed with this, especially also like in my daily job, like people speak about something by calling it a different way, and then only by do that they create enormous confusion.
Could you define what you mean by community then? What's a community?
I think so. A community is basically like it can be a business, but a community is I think is a group of people. Again, in this sense, this is my definition, but I think this is an open conversation. But I think is a group of people that is sort of act regularly and then around a topic, a cause, in a sort of in a consistent way. It organizes itself in regular and a consistent way around the topic, around the cause, around the problem. So the church is a community. Because there is a group of people that regularly meet together and they share a set of values, and they're delivering. They're talking about something and acting toward that in a consistent and shared way. Then how the community is created and is different. Like is the church around, like is it vertical or is it horizontal? That's another thing. Like, but when it's about growing, again, an Instagram account is about like you spreading a message, and then people are following you and agree or disagree with you. Then these people, like, do they really act in favor of something? Do they meet regularly? Like, do they share values between them? Yes or no, but probably there is more. They appreciate what the person that is running the Instagram account say or does, and eventually a percentage of them will share also the same values. And I think so. Legitimacy is in the sense is very important. To move to the next one is that also when you build a community, and I think that's also another question that you have to ask yourself after if you agree that you need a community, if you agree that you have legitimacy of that, you need to basically be completely aware that you need to let it go. So when you build a community, you can't control it. Otherwise, it's not a community. Otherwise, it's you imposing rules of what people should do. And I think it's not anymore a shared thing. It's more like people listening to your ideas and acting. So that's why political parties not anymore a community. Even though they acting in favor of democracy, where democracy should be the sort of the main the baseline of the community itself. And the last thing is that this is the most important one, is that again is the difference between building a business and building a community and all doing the two things all together, is that as much as you build a business, you need commitment to succeed. When you build a community, you need the same commitment. So if you want to do both, then you need double commitment. That's why, like, when you ask yourself, okay, do I really need to build a community? And am I legitimate? Am I really ready to let it go and then sort of put on the table my ideas and let the people to play with that and lose control on that? Yes, but then the community, because if you initiate the community, and then here probably we go more in the previous topic around leadership, I think the community needs always to be sort of nurtured. Like at some point, if people don't, if you're not committed to keep the community growing, especially at the beginning, then it will die before you actually think, and then you will not succeed on what you on
They need
what you want to do.
feed on kind of self-proudness.
Yeah. And also, like, especially at the beginning, like, you know, a community, again, to go back on the conversation, like, it doesn't mean a community need to be like 1 million people. If you have a group of 30 people that meet regularly around, share value, and then take action, is a community of 30 people. Then if in your agenda, your vision is about, okay, from 30 we want to become 30,000, then you need to have a plan. But to achieve that plan, you need to be the plan need to be very transparent and understandable by everyone, because you need everyone to go from 30 to 30,000. And I think that's, again, so that these 30 people and the 31st, 32nd, 33rd person will need to understand who is part of it, and then who are the leader, and then how the 34th person will understand, okay, how I'm going to get the 35th.
So you built a community of people initially who all had a shared kind of passion for helping solve challenges that social enterprises were having.
Yeah.
That was the kind of.
I think that by looking back at this slide is more like we built a community of people that were passionate about, solving social problem.
Yeah.
They start to recognize the value, the power of social entrepreneur. But there were people that probably would not be ready or not interested to become a social entrepreneur. Yeah. So then probably they had questions like, how can I help those people? And then I think that was the answer of their question. It was very practical, easy, free, and understandable. And then very sort of lean in terms of the time needed to have an impact. Because you could be part of one session, one workshop that we were running for the social entrepreneur, and then maybe for you was enough. Like, because the idea of having an impact, the idea of having to be, we're, again, this narrative sort of this sort of capitalistic sustainability narrative is where we need to have an impact, and we need to have to change the world, and blah blah blah. But I think it's very subjective. Maybe for some people, helping one day one such entrepreneur, it was enough for the entire year, and we can't really argue against that. So I think that was also the beauty of it. Like it was very everybody can design their own journey or how to have an impact within the community, but all at the end of the day, regardless of the time you were spending, we were all in the same boat and with the same mission and same agenda. And I think that's it. Well, that's it. I think that's it for these slides, but I'm very happy to then continue the conversation. If you have any questions, also understand more from you, what was your idea, you guys, what was your idea about building community importance, and how, what's your vision around these topics?
Can you explain the business model then? How does that separate kind of, how did you monetize that then? How does that separate business model work with the community? So
the separate business model is basically, to give you a very simple example, is makes sense. Build a business is basically helping corporation to solve such a problem by applying the practice learned within the community, within the employees of a company X. So, and that was a service, basically a service provided to the company that was paid by the company.
I see.
And that was a business completely separate, generating revenues and profit, and then having his own life.
So how do you decide who should kind of pay for that service, and then for whom it's a free?
That is a separate business. So the business, there is a team, and then they obviously work with companies that are interested of paying for their service.
A tendering process?
Sorry?
A tendering process? A process of bidding? Do you bid for work? Is it people coming to you mainly, or you going to people?
I think well, at the
Which one
beginning,
did you
at the beginning it was for the business or for the community.
Sorry, for the business.
Well, at the beginning, obviously, there is for any service provider, the customer acquisition was a strong, but then also now companies start to be interested and contacting the makes sense, and then they present their problem. And I think. So to give you a very simple example, it's more about. Okay, I think you have to see that as a maybe a corporation usually dealing with certain social causes in a very sort of traditional way, corporate social responsibility, and moving into how can we really engage better our employees around certain causes, and then so it makes sense as will come on board of that with a very strong tracking record of practices and results done outside a corporation environment, and then basically applying the same practices within a restricted community that is an employees to then deliver what the company wants to be delivered. But it's completely separate conversation where the community doesn't have zero visibility. Well, not zero visibility, no, results are shared, but it's a separate business. So when you join Makes Sense, you don't join the sort of the corporation service business provider. It's not in the picture. It is not even your expectation are not to be part of that.
There is also the incubator that brings revenues, no? In Paris.
Yes. Well, then the incubator has been the latest sort of business.
And also the impact invest.
Yeah. I think, again, this is, as we know, incubator usually are not very profitable businesses. But I think per se, again, it doesn't matter. But the point there is that the incubator is a separate legal entity that is able to raise funds and offer services to such entrepreneur at another level. But again, this is in a separate way to how the community works and everything.
So I have a question for everyone, which Alberto talked about how often organisations get it wrong with onboarding new people, and I wonder if anyone has had any particularly good or positive experiences where you thought, oh, that was really nice, or that worked well, perhaps when you're trying to interact with a new entity, to sort of get into it and find out what it's all about.
It's a question for me.
For everyone. Anyone seen any that they
Can you say it again, but differently? Maybe in Swedish. Just say it again.
Okay, so any examples of where you have come across an organisation and you've been knocking on the door and it's been a pleasant and good positive experience with it being open and you're welcomed with open arms?
For someone you're about to start working with, or
more like something like Makes Sense. I mean, well, let's say volunteer with, participate in, not necessarily get a job with. I mean,
I'm not going to say the interdependence.
It wouldn't be true, right?
I think first and foremost it begins with the way that you build relationships as a team, as a core team. Then the content that you create. So if you can get a very good connection on a human level and then feel like it makes sense what you're presenting, and that it's concrete and there's a plan and there's a conviction to it, I think that's really important. Then the final ingredient is fun, right? That's the thing that I remember from Make Sense with One, is that we go there and then One will play guitar and we just have a laugh. And it was a fun way to meet people and hang out. It created a frame for just people just to have a really light-hearted and playful social experience. And so that's why a load of really basically students and graduates would just always come to make sense, and this was like their alumni network. They wouldn't bother with their university that much, but actually Make Sense was much more fun, and you could travel around the world and you could connect with other Make Senses. And then there's other communities like Sandbox and Global Shapers and others that just give you that freedom and that fun of connecting around the world. I'd say that most people, at least when I was there, that came to Make Sense for the people and for the conversations they'd have. It wasn't so much about a specific cause or like that we were helping social enterprises, even though that was nice. It was the fact that we all kind of chopped food together and did like what was it called? The kind of disco soup or something like that. And then people would like dance and chop music, and the music was outside, and then we'd all throw into the soup, we'd eat together, everyone would bring beers. And I think that there's, that was my sense of just like when you can really make it fun, and then people want to build that relationship. Was that the same for you, Alberto?
Yeah, but I think for me it's very interesting that because my vision around this is that the chats that you say, like, you know, having fun, I think that is a consequence of this. Rather, because also I don't want to give the sort of the false lesson or the false sort of suggestion of like, you know, you need to create an informal environment. You need to have a chat. You need to have the laugh. You need to have the chats. Like, because if you become like a fourth thing, like it wouldn't work.
No, it has to be.
So, but I think the chats and the informal environment and the sort of the flow,
The two
and
work pretty well together.
but I think it's coming from the clear message, simple, clear message, and the fact that people were all at the same level and all rewarded at the same level. And I think the main reward is about learning new things. And I think because when people learn, people are happy. And then when people are happy, they're having a laugh. So I think that was for me, that's the biggest lesson. And I think to go in the introduction, I think we got this. I'm not sure that was planned. I think that is my sort of reflection on also becoming also older and getting understanding other things. But I think these consequences of this connection between learning and laughs, I don't think it was planned.
What's the vision for you?
For the community.
Yeah.
Potentially that every single person is involved in Make Sense.
Yeah. That's the vision, that everyone is involved.
Yeah, but also, because at the end of the day, it's also about, the applying sort of these practices on solving such entrepreneurial challenges is more like also learning how you can be a problem solver without having the support of any sort of institution above you.
So
Look,
that's
how can
kind of
people?
the vision that everyone is a problem solver. Everyone can solve.
Yeah, but then you can't do things alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, then at the end of the day, you still need leaders. You still need people that act. You still need people that probably have more certain expertise over others. But at the end of the day, everybody's needed. But the people can solve things without big institution. The only reason why we still need big institution is because the institution have capitals, I believe. But and then going back on the conversation that was before, is that the only way to turn around a capital is to create a system that is not based on capital. But so I think that's a good conversation, right? The word of cryptocurrency and stuff. But then that's the reason why you still need an institution to be involved, but it doesn't mean that they need to set the rules.
Anyone have any other questions?
So just in what you were saying, so it's put the pennies finally dropped on that with what Alberto said as well. Thinking of some examples of that, where I felt I've come into a situation where it's felt open and things have worked. Alberto mentioned if you're pulling people in, it's important that they know what they're going to do. That's really useful because they can come in full of enthusiasm. If that's not then harnessed or channeled, directed, they can fall flat very quickly, like a balloon deflating maybe. So I think a clear direction, working for Crisis pretty much, but the aim of my job and pretty much every employee of working for Crisis was to make ourselves redundant, was the ultimate aim, depressingly. Work's booming there. Homelessness is huge and growing. So it's going the other direction not through Crisis' fault, obviously. Immediacy of a problem. I went over to the jungle in Calais and worked with various organisations that are working with the refugees. But one of the ones that I found most useful and productive was an organisation called Care for Calais. And they're just straight into let's just deal with what needs to be dealt with right now, right at this time. What's the time now? What will be the time in 5 minutes? What do we need to do in the next 5 minutes? Because it was that immediate, the severity of the problems going on there, that I'm sure we're all aware of. And immediacy, the sort of, I think that helps garner stuff when clock's ticking.
Yeah.
Severity as well of the situation like that situation, but also having a clear plan. And I think if people can see, there's the big long-term plan, which might be too much to take in terms of what can my small role do. But if you can chop that down into smaller legs, smaller, Gantt chart bits. Yeah. Then that makes those bite-sized bits are more palatable and digestible for people involved.
Yeah, that's why for us the workshop, that was exactly what you say, like it's a small thing, but if you multiply that by 1,000, then you can argue, okay, what to do next and stuff, but
one thing leads on, can lead on.
Yeah, but also I think that where it comes down to also how, we always have this conversation in social innovation, how like different communities can collaborate. And a lot of time different community clash because there is also an ego problem created within the community that is multiplied by the people that are part of it. So I think the conversation is like how when we come down into how different community can collaborate, is like how can you map the sort of the change process into different parts, and some community will own the first part, and then what happened after is you need to find your partner that is in line with you, rather than replicating the thing. Like how can then from what you do can move into another community to then deliver what eventually we wouldn't be able to offer. Because Makes Sense obviously is is an amazing movement. Does also have its own limitation, There's been a lot of conversation around what we can do after workshops, and we try, many things, and now, like, I don't, recently I've been less involved, but regardless the actual results, it's clear that Makes Sense cannot own the entire change process. We need other people, we need other communities, and that's why probably, in a way, the businesses at the top of Makes Sense also help a bit to fill the gap, because when it comes down to work with corporation, it's very hard to think that corporation will deal with a free volunteer open source community to deliver stuff that when it comes there's reality of things, if you have to share offices, if you need to share documentation, information, a company will never give it away. So you need an organization that can act as a business, so then the corporation trusts.
Just a small question.
Bye.
When you talk about the reward and reputation system,
Yeah.
by reward you mean just appreciating people for what they're doing?
Yeah. Oh, like, yeah, exactly. I think, for example, is like think about what people can get, and it doesn't mean that it need to be, it doesn't mean you need to put it like to make it clear and upfront and say, okay, if you join us, that's what you're gonna get. Maybe not, don't do that, but like you need to think about how, you need to think about how people will be rewarded. It has to be sort of like, between the line. And I think that, for example, in our case, one of the simple reward is that, like, because as a community we were start to become more and more sort of involved with working with a social entrepreneur, attending conferences, working with other big organizations. Then, for example, like if you want to be, as you move as a student, you want to move into that world and have a work experience, be part of Make Sense will really allow you to get some contact and show your skills in a more efficient way than maybe attending 20 interviews before to get a job. So getting a job through that experience, that is definitely a reward. That also has a monetary value. But there are many other ways to reward people, and also within Make Sense the where. It doesn't matter. It's more about thinking about like, okay, the fact that people at some point need to be rewarded.
I think perhaps often people can, from what you're saying, it seems like people can be, they can find solutions to problems that they perhaps didn't even know they had, and they can find solutions in places where they didn't know where to look, and it's more about like creating the conditions where those bits of inspiration can happen organically, rather than saying this is the solution to this problem.
Yeah.
I mean, finding a job, for instance, is a good example. You would never be able to say this is what you can expect if you go through this experience. But if you have, I don't know, a little bit more like imagination and try not to be like too formulaic in your expectations, then you might be open to solutions that you never knew were possible,
Exactly.
or even conceiving of a problem in a way that you didn't know was possible.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you don't even know how to think about what you can't put your mental finger on a problem because it's amorphous and it changes and it has different outlets.
No, 100%. And I think also, for example, like learning for me is a big reward. And again, when it was down to get other people involved in the community, the argument was never like, oh, come here because you're gonna learn this.
Yeah.
But it was obvious that since the minute 0, minute 10, you were already start to learn new things, so like you didn't need to explicit. So then the mechanism was there. So like people at the end will start to, after 20 minutes, will already start to feel that we're learning. So then the motivation and engagement will grow exponentially. So it's
and I think
you learn so much through teaching, don't you? Through explaining, through brainstorming, that you learn so much more than just passively kind of absorbing knowledge. If you're giving knowledge, then you're also gaining so much at the same time.
Yeah. But obviously, like also like continuously like also iterate and questioning the way you deliver that reward, because this workshop there's still part of the core of the community, and it's been the first sort of one of the first practice. Then at some point it became not enough, like people needed more. So that's where other format, other things have been created, like from creating bigger conferences of 350 people for each city, there was another way to learn, like other type of format of workshop, other type of event. And I think again all these things came up from the community and built by the community. So there was no rules, like everybody can, if like people were they because everything was transparent, everything is there. I think when it was very clear for anyone to understand, or at least for the people more involved, to understand when was the time to make a change and change something. Like it was not more about like, okay, in 2 months we're gonna do this because this is in the roadmap of like our action. Like at some point you felt it, like okay, so you keep discussing, and after like months and a year, like I said, okay guys, maybe this running only this workshop is not enough. And it's true. I was like, what can we do? Bam, and then you present something. You try something else. Because again, there was no money involved. No, like then expectation where like a risk was zero. So everything was a gain. Even the biggest failure.
Especially the biggest failure.
Yeah, but even I think the biggest failure was not seen. I think also the idea of failure was. I don't think anybody ever thought, like, ever even mentioned failure within, like.
Yeah, it's a positive word in the startup community, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, we when it's about a workshop, like, or event, like, it didn't really matter of like you do an event with 10 people or 100. Who cares?
Yeah, make something.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Alberto.
Thank you for having me, guys.